What's up, my brothers and sisters? Welcome to the Fireground Fitness Podcast, where we talk about all things pertaining to life on and off the fireground. The views and the opinions expressed are those of your host and our guest. Today we sit down with Kris Kazian and talk about leadership and lessons learned as he came up through the fire service, serving on the East Coast and all the way over here into the West Coast. We talk about so many different things and what an amazing omelet chef he is on top of it all. I hope you enjoy. Kris, thank you so much for making the time to sit down and talk about yourself a little bit in your career. And I know leadership is something that is a passion for you, and I want to dive into some of that. So let's talk a little bit about you.
About me?
Yeah.
All right.
Where did you come up, and what was your journey into the fire service like?
Well, it's interesting. So growing up, I grew up, I tell people I think we were either gypsies, circus, part of the circus I didn't know about, or the IRS was looking for us. So I probably moved 15 to 20 times by the time I got to high school.
Military or?
Nope. Just
gypsies.
Single mom, and I'm on the run, I think. And so my brother and I were raised by a single mom. Kind of thinking back to Kane Nixon's story as well, listening to his podcast, a very similar type story. And so hardworking mom who taught me nothing but great stuff. And so hard work ethic. But so we moved all over the place. So I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago primarily.
Oh, cool.
And, started working at a young age, 12 years old, riding a tandem bike in the snow to bus tables and things like that. And started painting houses with my aunt in the summer times, taking the L, bus and L into the city to work for the day. And that just created some strong work ethic. And I kind of stuck around the same area from about 15 to about 42 when I left Illinois and came out to Arizona. And so
So you started your career in the fire service in Illinois?
I did. I started in Illinois. So I worked at a gas station, which maybe we'll talk about a little later, but I worked at a full service gas station. And so I pumped gas, changed oil, checked tires, that type of stuff. And right in the middle of town is where this gas station was. So all the ambulances, all the fire trucks would come out of the station and drive by, either going to the hospital or going to calls is a very regular thing. So I just saw the fire trucks going by. I always wondered, that's interesting. I wonder what they do. Had zero knowledge. And if I could take my Kris Kazian self back in time, I remember going, I'm going to go to the firehouse and see what this is all about. I literally opened the door. There was people in the watch office. Can I help you? And I'm like, I don't know. How do you become a firefighter?
I don't know. Maybe you can help me.
and they just literally walked me through what I could do to be a firefighter. And in Illinois, they at least at this place, they said, you really got to be 21. But why don't you take an application? I mean, sometimes we hire people that are younger if we like you.
Right.
And I'm like, okay. And so I just graduated high school, took the application home, completed it, dropped it back off, and about 2 months later they called me and said, hey, we got a interview. You want to interview? So I jumped in.
And what level of education did you have, like fire service education?
Zero.
Okay.
Zero. I got one family friend that was a firefighter in the neighboring town that, I mean, he may try to take credit for exposing me to the fire service, but we stopped by his station once or twice. So really not much there. And I just fell into it. I mean, I probably have a servant heart that it played to, growing up. So before that, I applied. I got hired as a volunteer, or they call it paid on call there.
Oh, okay.
And so I went through my fire academy, EMT, and my paramedic. So that was February of 90 when I got hired. And I was a certified medic and firefighter 1 and 2 by August of 21.
That's
21,
awesome. So
91,
right out of high school.
Yep.
So we're about the same age. Yep. I ran off and joined the Marine Corps, and you joined the fire service.
I was looking at the Air Force, and I know we talked about there. You talked another podcast.
I thought you said you had a work ethic.
That's why I didn't go. See, I knew it wouldn't be a good fit. So so I did that. I got on the job there, and that was my part-time deal. And then in Illinois, you got to be 21 to get hired. So neighboring town had a test that was open. and it was before I was 21, but they forgot to put a disclaimer in, so I was able to get hired 12 days after I turned 21, and so I started there as a fire medic.
Cool.
And the rest is history. I had some great leaders, some great people that influenced me, but it all stemmed from just watching trucks go back and forth at the gas station.
So you did the body of your career. So you became a chief officer when you came to Arizona, as I'm guessing.
I was a chief officer in Illinois.
Oh, okay. Okay. But chief of department.
Chief of department, Arizona.
Copy.
Yeah.
So talk about your uprising inside your organization. Like, what was that like for you? Were there any obstacles that you faced as you kind of promoted and challenges? I'm curious, like, complete ignorance here. What's it like to fight fire in Illinois? Because sounds just cold and miserable to me, but I want to hear what it's really like.
So there's a couple things that I'll talk about. So first, so I got hired at a place. I was 21 years old. I was riding a crotch rocket with flip-flops and a tank top on, pulling in my
Pillar of safety.
Pillar of safety. I, pull into a firehouse, running my motor and not knowing anything from anyone. Again, I was the worst hire, the worst applicant. I would never hire my back then self, I don't think. But someone saw something in me. Thank God. I really appreciate that they gave me a chance. So always take a lesson about, giving people a chance because they could surprise you. When I started in that career job, everyone there was like 40 something, which to me looked like old, ancient.
Mm-hmm.
They're 20 years on the job. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I never want to be those guys. And so I always said, I'm 20 and I'm getting out. So I work with a bunch of folks that I was like, whatever, man. And I didn't know what I didn't know. But I started teaching pub ed on my days off. And so I became kind of almost the face of the fire department, me and another guy. And it just opened up opportunities. I went to a rope rescue class in 1992. At that point in time, there was no rope rescue type stuff. It was, I think, the second class they ever offered in Illinois, to my knowledge anyway. I mean, there may be someone will fact check me on that, but back in the day, that's what it was. And so I came back, and the lieutenant that I went with said, "Hey, Kris, I want you to write a proposal." And I'm like, I don't even know what a proposal is. So I wrote this rope proposal, how much rope we had to buy, NFPA 1983, virgin rope, and it could only, like, all kinds of stuff, and figured out a color coding system so our carabiners wouldn't get messed up with someone else's carabiners and all kinds of stuff. It ended up being kind of took shape for a county-wide, at least first 1.0 version. And that put my name on the map as being someone that could do something, stuff I didn't know I could do. And so I quickly promoted. I made lieutenant by the time I was 20, as April of 96. In April of 96, my brother's became a firefighter by then. He's working with me alongside.
So you're about 27?
I'm 20. No, I'm 24. I was born in 70, so that would be 20. Yeah, 26. Oh. So I'd be turning 26. I was 25. No. Yeah, I was 25, turned 26 that year. My brother's on the job. He's working at the same department at the time. We get a call at 4 p.m. for people trapped in an apartment for a townhouse fire. So me and him go in on the first engine, and one other guy. We go in the first engine. The other guy puts out the fire. My brother and I go search. We find two children that end up perishing. It was like the defining moment in the leadership of what leadership really means is in that moment. I wasn't truly a lieutenant, but I was going to be one in a couple days, and how the magnitude of that. I then became lieutenant. Shortly after that, became a shift commander, which was a captain role. I was an acting shift commander. We never had a battalion chief role. They do now, but I never was a battalion chief by rank, but by position. Became a captain shift commander. Then I went to assistant chief of operations, and shortly after that, deputy chief of operations, where I worked, 22 years there, retired in 2012.
Wow. Well, okay, so you just cruised through. You made it sound like it was super easy. So there's no way that it could be. So what were some of you talked about leadership lessons, and what are some of the things that you learned along the way that really shaped or defined your role as a lieutenant, as a captain? Like, what did that look like for you?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about my first day. I think it was my first, maybe it was my second shift, but first or second shift, we had got pinged out for a mutual aid structure fire. I had a a crew of 3 of us, I think at the time. Might have been 4, I can't remember, but I think it was 3. No, it must have been 4. And I said, hey, we're going to send those 2 on the tender that was being requested, and you and I are going to stay back to this firefighter. Age-wise, much more senior than I age. Tenure on the job, much less senior. He lived in the town where the fire was at, and he got on the tender. It was a tanker back then, actually, but on the tender, and went out the door after I told him, no, you're staying back with me on the ambulance, and he gave me the finger as he was pulling out the door, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? So I literally first or second day on the job, here's a guy that's 15 years older than I am. I forgot to tell you, his dad was the president of the board. Oh. So
political consequences.
Yes. So what do I do? So I talked to my boss at the time, and it got kicked up to the fire chief, and there was discipline that occurred, and I wish I had the letter still, but the fire chief basically wrote a letter that said, in my absence, any one of my officers is in the likeness of me and is operating, and it was very awkward because then no one that knew the story, I didn't want to go around saying, you know what that guy did?
Right.
Everyone's like, Kris is out to write everyone up. He's young. He's trying to prove himself. And I was like, that's the last thing I wanted to do. So that was like my first literal day or 2 as a lieutenant. So challenging, managing people much older than I am, people with much more seniority than I had. And, but I was up to the challenge. I was intrigued by leadership and what it takes to be there for people. You asked what it was like to fight fires in Illinois too, so I'll get to that. But I got any more leadership questions or anything I missed in there? I mean, I went to captain. So then I went to captain, and so then I was shift commander, and I had a really big. You could talk to a bunch of people that'll listen to this podcast, I'm sure, if I post it, or when I post it. I had rules at the dinner table, like everyone sits at the dinner table for an hour. We're family. We're going to sit there for an hour. This is in 1997, 98, 99, probably 99. And people are like, you're forcing me to sit at the table? This seems childish. And I'm like, so I saw where we were heading. I'm sure I saw it. It's retrospectively, I guess I was correct. But I saw us pulling apart. At that point we had, all these diets. People were on all these fad diets, and it's like, well, I don't eat the food you guys are cooking. We weren't cooking the best food. It was great firehouse food.
Food, yeah.
But I'm like, I don't care if you eat your, microwave meal, but you're sitting here for an hour. Cell phones were a thing, but we didn't have them like they are today. So I didn't have to put a cell phone bucket or anything like that. But I said, we're sitting here, we're going to talk about life. We're going to talk about ourselves, our families. And it became a very strong knit, appreciation for what we now know as a fire family.
That's that time spent at the kitchen table is critical to team building. It's one of the elements of it, right? So going out on calls and having that transactive event where you're both in it together, everyone's in this event fighting fire together or whatever the event is, bonds a team. But but in the meantime, right, when those things aren't happening, what are other ways you can do that? One of them is the kitchen table.
Right.
It's hugely important.
And we had an open bunk room when that station.
The good old days.
Built. Yeah, the good old days, right? And so we had just crazy antics, which statute of limitations are over now, so we're okay. But some crazy times, and then we renovated that station and went to the kind of the pony walls, and so we went to a kind of a one room, but we had the pony walls and that versus where we're at in today's world where everyone's got their own bunk rooms. And so all these little dynamics all are meant well in the fire service, but I think it impacts our ability to just be like it used to be. And so when everyone goes, hey, I wish it was like it used to be, or I was on the fire department when it was fun. Yeah, it's we need to make it, what it is today, but it's different. You wouldn't build a fire station today in an open bunk room. You just wouldn't do that. So So don't hang your hat on, well, it used to be like that and be mad about it. Just go, okay, it's a change.
Well, and the question becomes, well, what was it about an open dorm that bonded the unit together, right? What was fun about it? Yeah. Apart from, shenanigans in the bunk room and things that you would do, IV drips over someone's pillow, whatever. I distinctly remember having I was laying in bed, eating Hershey's Kisses. And my backseat partner goes, I can hear you over there sneak eating. So I start lobbing Hershey's over to his bunk. And, just those little things that, good memories. So how do you, so I guess, so then it becomes, you have to replace that with something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think because in today's world, we're looking at, so much of individualism, meaning, I go down the track and all these podcasts, people that are just, we didn't have all that. So you had to go to a conference to get information with a whole group of folks. Now I'm getting it individually wherever I listen to my podcast, wherever I get my information. Even the magazines, right, are less and less. So you used to get the Fire Engineering Firehouse and you'd look at the article and you'd talk about it. Now you're getting an email every day with new articles, new stories. And so it's better in some ways, and it doesn't have that, hey, it's a new month and we're getting new firehouses out. Let's look at the cover and let's talk about what we see on this cover and have a little training opportunity. It's you got to go to your phone, open it up, read the article, look at it, whatever, pull it up on the screen. So there's a lot of different nuances. I think it's doable, but the reality is it's not the same. And I think so many people want to make it the way it used to be.
Right.
And we have to embrace that it's not going to be like that. We're not riding the tailboard anymore. We're in 3/4 boots anymore.
Right.
So let it go and move forward into what the new era is. You mentioned about what it's like to fight fires in Chicago. It sounds miserable. So we had the home birthplace of MABUS, mutual aid box alarm system. So we had a huge network of emergency response. You're in the Phoenix system, so it's similar to that, where you have no boundaries and things like that. We went to a lot of fires back there because as a fire occurred, then this MABUS system would activate alarms: 1 alarm, 2 alarm, 3 alarm, a box alarm, 2nd alarm, 3rd alarm. And so we went to a lot of fires because our neighboring communities would use that system for bringing in resources. And so we had a snorkel. In my first volunteer job, or the paid-on-call job I had, we had a snorkel. And we were the only people that had a snorkel in the area. So it went to all the fires because it could pump. I don't even remember what the GPMs were, but it was a beast. 1972 La France, I think it was. But open cab. And so, when it's snowing, raining, you got back from a call wet and you're driving back, we'd have like a wool blanket and you'd be hugging the doghouse, trying to just keep warm to get back in the firehouse. And, it's just different, it's just cold and now obviously all the cabs are enclosed. And so it's probably not much different. The air conditioning,
it's probably a little bit better now, I imagine, but still being on the fire ground this is dumb question, I guess, but was there anything that you guys had to do on the fire ground kind of before, during, or after a fire to stay healthy?
No, we had a pretty aggressive adopt a hydrant program. So through the kids in the schools, we pushed a lot of adopt a hydrants. So we had certificates that would go out and back then again you couldn't snap a picture on your phone and send it to us. So you had to send a Polaroid or something. I don't know, but. But so we had a pretty aggressive campaign to get people to adopt hydrants and get the hydrants clear for us. So that was a big deal for us. Didn't have the freezing stuff that Kane Nixon talked about, having to torch them. We had potential for that, but I never had to do anything like that in my career. A couple big snowstorms back in the day that you just navigate and deal with, but. No, otherwise I'd say it's fairly status quo, no different than fighting a fire in 120 degrees. It's just different. And, fire goes out the same way. So good times, and it's great. And then 2012, I had an opportunity. I had 20. I told folks that when I get 20 years, and I'm going to retire and become a teacher. I love teaching, and I was up at the deputy chief level I talked about, and if just a guess, but a deputy chief level and an entry level teacher are not nearly the same. So I wasn't gonna be able to feed my family with that kind of pay cut. So one of the guys sent me a note and said, "Hey, you see that job in Sedona?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't see it." So he sent me the link and said, "Man, the technical rescue and all kinds of stuff." I was a tech rescue kind
right
of
up your alley. Yeah.
I'm like, "This is gonna be sweet." So applied on a whim, and really, we have a whole different podcast to talk about politics in Sedona, and I think Buzz Lukowski talked a little bit about that in his interview on one of your earlier podcasts. But lo and behold, I applied and I got hired and I worked there. I left Illinois in 2012 and went to Sedona as their fire chief from 12 to 19. And so.
And you moved did you still have kiddos at home at that point? So
did.
you had a couple. I mean, a family of 5.
Yeah.
So did you move the family to Sedona?
Yeah.
How'd they enjoy that?
So my daughter was going to be a senior in high school. We're like, hey, are you willing to go? And she's like, I'm up for a challenge. Let's go for it. So she was totally in. So that made it easy. The youngest one, she was, too young to have a say in a vote in the house. So she was like a second grader or first grader maybe. So we just gave it a shot, and it's interesting when I applied for the job, again, I thought, we'll see. Well, I tell people now when I talk to them, coach, whatever type stuff, like never apply for a job that you wouldn't take. I mean, it's wasting your time and their time. And so I did it on a whim, so to speak. Really didn't think it all the way through. My wife and I were just like, put in this. That'd be cool. Like she had a brother-in-law that lived in Arizona, so she wanted to be close to him. And when I got offered the job, I said, I have to take it. At the end of the day, I'll forever worry about in my head what would have been not taking it, than taking it and not succeeding or whatever. And so that was, so something I always tell you is if you're going to apply for a job, it should be one that you're willing to take if offered.
Yeah. Well, how was that? So I've only worked in one system. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, how was it coming from Illinois into a system on the West Coast, essentially, right? So different in the response models and stuff like that. Do you feel that, well, I'm curious, just how different was that? How hard was that?
Yeah, so I got there, again, I'm used to the mutual aid system. So, I mean, I think one of the last fires I was at in Illinois before I left, I was a division on a hotel under construction fire. I think I don't know, my recollection, it's a long time ago, but I feel like I had 40 or 50 people assigned to my division, 6, 7, 8 companies, 9 companies, something like that. So when I get to Arizona and I'm like, so where's the mutual aid? And what's, they're like, oh, it's 45 minutes away. Like, this is what you get.
Yeah, Sedona is a fairly rural area. Although it's a big tourist destination, it's still fairly rural.
Isolated. And, so we caught a fire. I started in March. We had a fire that May, and I, took command and we're on the fire. And then I take a walk out and I see a bunch of guys in the back of the ambulance getting IVs. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, well, we're getting ready for the next bottle. And I'm like, you don't get IVs and go back to another bottle. Like, yeah, we do. Like up here, we got no help, man. And I'm like, so that was a big change just in the mutual aid part, how we kind of operated, kind of just the isolation of that and not having a lot of backup was big. The wildland component was obviously new to me. We had some wildland training back in Illinois, but it's not what we're talking about here by any means. I think, couple of weeks in, one of my guys was hanging from the bottom of a helicopter doing a
hoist or something.
Pick
off.
Yeah. Short haul. And I'm like, yeah, just so you know, like if anything bad happens, they hit the button, they drop them. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, I get it's cool. Like that wasn't what I asked you, but like, that's a big risk to take, and so they're up there doing more of those today than they were back when I was there. It's exponentially increased while I was there and much more so even after I've been gone. So, some of that technical rescue and then doing the technical rescue in the rock, that we do, before I got to Sedona, they had a 36-hour Insomnia Canyon rescue. They, slept overnight with a guy and, kept him warm by heating up rocks. And I mean, like, back wilderness type stuff that was totally new to me. But the best part about it is I knew that the people were good, the people knew what they were doing, and you trust your people. And so they, I was able to let them do what they do best, be a steward of the lesson, learning from them and paying attention, asking questions. That was my MO anyway. Whether it was successful, I guess you'd have to talk to somebody else, but that was the dynamic change there.
Yeah. Was it tough going from, what was the transition like going from a deputy position to the fire chief?
Yeah, you're never prepared for that. I mean, it's, you're focused on, I had a pretty good mindset of understanding. I'm a person that always asks questions. And so I've always, I like to vicariously learn through people. So back to Illinois days, another shift had a fire. I'd come in and I'd be like, hey, what do you guys do on that fire? What, and they're like, relax, third watch. We were gold shift or third shift. So they call us third watch, which is a TV show from back in the day. Like, that was our fire. Don't you worry about it, kid. I'm like, I want to know what you did. How'd it work? Did this, and so, my experience, I focused a lot on trying to learn, the next position up kind of mentality. So, but scary. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole game is on you, and everyone's watching you, every decision you make. And, if it doesn't work, at the end of the day, it's on you, and you got to own even the newest guy's mistakes. You got to own. I mean, at the end of the day, it's your, you're the chief.
Yeah.
So that was way different.
Yeah. Was there, I know at that level, the fire chief level, there's a lot of politics. How did you become a student of the game? How did you learn to play politics?
Baptism by fire, right? Yeah. I mean, I literally got hired I started in March, but I got hired before that and had to take some time to get things set up. There was a recall election going on in Sedona at the time. So the 3 of the 5 board members that were that were on the board that hired me were being recalled. One of the people that was running against this recalled group was the fire chief who left just before me because of that board.
Oh, man.
The recall was successful. All 3 people were removed. The past fire chief and a couple others got onto the board. So I didn't have a choice but to learn really, really fast. It was a very politically charged environment. And so I kind of came from a place where we just did our job and no one even really knew who we were. Hadn't probably had a fire board election, I don't think, in my 22 years. I don't think that I remember anyway. It was just, and actually, well, in Illinois, they were appointed by the county board. So that's, but they're never anything contentious. And then these elections.
Just off your radar completely.
Yeah. And I come out here to Arizona, and now in Colorado, they have elections, and, it's way more political. So just being astute of your surroundings, reading people well and going, okay, this is one we can trust, this is somebody we can't trust, type of thing. Definitely. But it was baptism by fire for sure.
Yeah, I imagine. That's I think about that a lot because it's such a human beings are complex, right? And all politics is, from my perspective, is human beings, and they're trying to navigate their own interests and the interests of their constituencies, and it seems like it's a very difficult thing to wrap your hands around, right? Trying to understand what other people are thinking, feeling, what motivates them, what pushes them. But I think I'll add, it's not a whole lot different than leadership in the firehouse, right? It's all about people.
Yep. Correct. Yeah. And it's, I would say I developed what I would call a concierge, kind of approach to board management, board leadership, like give them what they need to be successful at the end of the day, whether they're in it for the right reasons or they're not. As the fire chief, your job is to give them the information that they need to make. What they do with it is really up to them. And that's not my job to change them, but really to help lead them to the right decision. And I feel like was successful in Sedona. When I went to Colorado, which we haven't got to yet, but I left in 19 and went to Colorado, 19, then we know what happened in 20. And so for the next 18 months or so with COVID, it really became very difficult to engage with some folks at that level. And so it really, I don't think that they got the best of me as the concierge, board liaison and helper. But I feel like that's, and I've definitely have board members that I've, gotten along with better, and others that I didn't. Treat them all the same, right? At the end of the day, like, they're your bosses. They may have a different motive for what they're doing. They may be challenging, but I'm going to invite them to the table, and I'm going to do everything I would do because it's the right thing to do as far as leadership goes.
So let's talk about leadership. What are some things that define your leadership perspective?
Well, I think first and foremost, you got to care about the people. Like I got a heart and a passion for people. And so, seeing people succeed, seeing people reach their goals, seeing people achieve something that they've, wanted to do, giving people a chance. Again, I go back to thinking of my 18 or 19-year-old self at that firehouse. Someone saw something in me, and even in that I didn't share, but in that first system I was in, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you're going to be, someone thinks you're going to be a fire chief someday." And I kind of did a double take, and it was early in my career, maybe 2 years in, maybe 3 at tops. And I'm like, "Who said that?" Like, it doesn't matter who said it, but I'm just telling you, and it was. I found out who it was. It was the chief at the time, who was very well respected and had a very impressive career. And so something sparked a seed in me, like I gotta help.
Like, that's even possible?
Yeah, is that even possible?
Yeah.
And so leading just became part of my thing. And I didn't play sports. I told you we moved all over the place. So I wasn't in a place long enough to really even join a baseball team or anything. And so having this found team piece was really intriguing to me, and I really embraced it, enjoyed it. I went through my fire officer 1 and 2 and 3 classes, when I was, pretty young in my career. So it gave me a strong foundation as to some of the concepts and tactics that were in there for leadership and management of crew resource and team building and all those type of things. So I just feel like I probably hit it perfect in my career, where it just happened. And I'm blessed that we've been able to go 34 years now and enjoying the every day of it, essentially. So leadership's a big deal. And I think when I go back to that fire my brother and I were on, that was a really pivotal moment as to like, wow, my decisions are going to make a difference as to how we save or don't save somebody. In this case, we made an incredible rescue. It wasn't tactically incredible, but timing wise, it was very fast. The outcome was poor. But it gave me that perspective. And I was the firefighter in the back seat. Again, back to I wasn't the best anybody in the fire service. I was making decisions over the lieutenant or the captain I was working under 2 minutes before they would make a decision. Like, what's wrong with this guy? He doesn't know nothing. And when I made lieutenant, I realized that there's another filter to go through. And there is a time delay for that to make sure you're making the right decision. I had no accountability as a firefighter. I'm smartest guy on the fire ground, right? And then I'm a lieutenant. I'm like, oh man, and then I became a captain. Now there's 2 filters. Now you're assistant chief, a deputy chief. There's more filters you got to go through, and it makes a delayed response. And sometimes people question your leadership, like, you won't make a decision. Like, you got to, and you're accountable at a different level. It's different.
Yeah, there's a lot of variables that go into it. It's not so simple.
No.
Right?
No. Even if I get to the same decision you got to, 30 seconds or a minute earlier or a week earlier, like at the end of the day, firefighter Smith doesn't have any accountability to that, but Chief Kazian does. And if it's not right, there's a job that comes, is on the line with that type of stuff. And so realizing that. So it's just, but yeah, so leadership, I went to school, got my associates in fire science. Took me like 10 years, but I got that eventually. Got my fire science management bachelor's degree. And then I went into organizational leadership and got a master's in organizational leadership because I really wanted to get out of the fire service. I wanted to do something in some other realm in leadership, but I still find myself here enjoying every day of it until I don't.
So I feel like education is often downplayed in the fire service, and I think it's really, really important. And I'm curious to hear your perspective. Obviously, you found it important, right? What is it how do you feel it's shaped your career, or how do you feel it's been important to you?
Well, yeah, we hear it all the time, like, oh, that piece of paper on the wall ain't going to put the fire out, man. And so first, I always say, one, education is so critical because it's something that they can't take away from you. That's yours, and it's yours solely. So how you choose to engage in it and how you choose to use it, but that is yours and yours alone. So that's my first building block. Second is I look at it as someone that has started something and finished something. A lot of times in our field, we see a lot of people get squirreled somewhere else and never finish a degree, never do something. So when I'm interviewing or looking at resumes for people that have degrees, I don't even care what it's in. It tells me that they started something, had a vision, and if it's in fashion design and now you want to be a firefighter, I want to hear your story. How did you go from fashion design to being a firefighter? That's really cool, versus someone who went to public administration and now they're a firefighting, there's a equally cool story there. So I really value that immensely rather, as a cornerstone. That being said, school is not for everybody. So I don't also look down on somebody who doesn't have a degree and say, wow, you're obviously deficient and aren't, you're missing something. I think it's two different tracks you go down, and evaluating the importance of schooling is something I just say, everyone, if it's not for you today, it should be at some point. I'd like to see you get there, but and there's never a good time. Everyone says, I got a new baby. I got this going on. I'm a new lieutenant. There's never a good time. It's not a good time for me. I said, you show me when a good time is, and I'll sign you up. There's never a good time for school.
No, I've always felt like if there's tuition reimbursement, then you have to take advantage of that. For sure. It is a benefit to you. Now take one class at a time, whatever it is, but go. And for me, the kind of pragmatic side of it was going to school. I learned how to write.
Correct.
I learned how to critically think. And I don't sit in my office ever and go, this one thing I learned, in class, in Econ 101, no. But I do find myself, it helped me become more thoughtful and more academic. And this is the growth the path I grew on, right? And then I think that's the important part is everybody gets a little something different from it, and they grow. And sometimes you get a little bit of tools, and other times it's just you learn about yourself and how to work and how to process information and things like that, and how to get curious about problems.
Yeah.
Right. Instead of just seeing things from your limited perspective, it broadens that horizon.
Yeah, but from your speech class you took, your econ class, your statistics class, all those pieces now come into play. And I was like, I don't know what that thing's ever going to do for me. Your writing skills, everything you just talked about, the speaking skills, your relationships, your problem solving, all of that gets built into who you are today. You talked about, maximizing your tuition reimbursement. I always chuckle at that because I'm like, so you're telling me that you're going to give me $5,000 a year to go to school or $2,000 a year to go to school, and I'm gonna take 2 classes and maximize my $2,000, and over the next 10 years I'm gonna get $20,000 out of the department, and now I'm gonna have a degree, and it's not gonna cost me a dime. As an organization, I'm like, we're paying $20,000 for this dude either way. I'd rather pay the $20,000 now and have him useful with that degree than in 10 years from now, if he even finishes it in 10 years. You know what I mean? We invest $12,000 and he drops out and doesn't ever finish. We don't have a real recourse for that typically, right? Yeah. I'm like, what are we fooling ourselves for? Let's find a ways to get people in, get educated, get a degree and in a much more timeliness than, because you're paying the same dollar amount. We're fooling ourselves. I get overtime. There's some budgetary concerns. If everyone went to school and we had paid $20,000, for everyone, we'd be broke, whatever. But I've always in the mindset, let's look at it a little bit differently. And so that's a part of my leadership as well, as look at things a little bit differently. Sometimes we get so trapped into the way I was told. Look at what we're doing right now with flow path and all the technology, science data that's out there, right?
Right.
There's people that are still going to fight us and say that's not right. And you're like, what do you mean? No, you don't trust those dudes?
Right.
Wait a second. This is no. My grandpa told me this is the way it is. Things have changed, man. And so having that change management kind of mindset, willingness to upset the apple cart a little bit, just look at things a little different, challenge people. Not in an inappropriate way, but in a just, hey, let me ask a question. Because so often when someone says something, we nod our heads and are like, oh, yeah, well, do you really agree with what I just said? Well, not really, but I don't want to say, you'd be like, it's okay. Let's have, create an environment where you can have healthy conversation, because that's where we're going to learn and grow, is when we have those healthy conversations and environment and culture where, if I'm the chief, I don't know the answers. You're on the street. You probably have the answers back to my original comment before I get there.
Right.
So tell me the answer and let's vet it out. And sometimes you're going to be right. Or maybe more often than not, you're going to be right. And other times you're not going to be right. You have to appreciate that you don't get to be right every time. Kind of what we talked about earlier before we hit record, right?
Yeah. Well, we were talking a little bit about change before and how hard change is because we get fixed in things that we know and love and are comfortable with. But change is an illusion, right? Because it is happening whether we like it or not. You brought up flow path and things like that and modern fire dynamics. That's something that was thrust upon us because the operational context evolved over 30, 40 years. It changed. And if we don't change as well, we're going to find ourselves in dangerous places, literally, in this particular case. And sometimes it's just find ourselves obsolete, right, in less extreme situations. But we have to be willing to be curious. And I think that's we get so hooked on to the things that we know and love, certain types of hoses and nozzles and, station environment, like, it's got to be a certain way. And no, hey, things have changed.
I think I heard it was Ken from not Ken, a different guy, Kerber from
Steve Kerber.
Steve Kerber, yeah. There was a guy named Ken Kerber, so I was drawing the blank on Steve Kerber, from FSRI, saying, how fast is the fire service willing to absorb the data we're giving? Like, we can't go back to the lab and provide all this data that you guys can't absorb at a rate at which you can't absorb. Like, we have to figure out how to embed this into our mindset. And you look at a lot of other organizations and cultures, some that have been successful when they change on a dime and others that don't, right? So we've heard plenty of, like Kodak in the digital camera world and, we don't need that stuff, and they don't change, or Apple, and they had 200 items or something, I think, is, when Steve Jobs came back after being thrown out, he said, hey, let's do a couple things really good. Like, what? Like, let's just do a couple things really good. And their offerings were, reduced immensely, and they are obviously crushing what they do in Apple now. It was a change in a mindset, and I'm sure it was difficult for the company to say, wait a second, we have 200 SKUs? That's got to sell us better than 10. No, if we could sell 10 amazing experiences is kind of, I think, one of the Steve Jobs.
Right.
When you buy an iPhone, it's an experience. When you buy the, iPod Shuffle, like you're owning part of history, if you will, not just buying a device that it communicates. And so that mindset is huge. And if you create that in the fire service, endless possibilities.
Yeah. So we had touched on it before we hit record again. We talked a long time. By the way, I have to say this. Kris is the first podcast guest to make me an omelet. I'm just saying the bar has been set. Prior to this, it's only been water. So bread and water. Delicious. Among Kris's many talents, one of them is omelet maker, fantastic sous chef. So, or what would you call that? A short order cook.
Yeah.
Anyways, now I forgot what I was going to say.
It's about change.
I had a brilliant point. I was going to talk about the idea of the infinite mindset.
Yes.
And this, in the fire service, the just cause, right? And you talk about Apple, and their just cause was, we are going to bring this experience, this cultural experience. And I'm making up, what I think they might have said, but that's what it's turned into. And when people are like, I have an iPhone, it's a special thing to have. And so we have to wonder in the fire service, what is our just cause, right? And I think you and I talked, and I'll just say it, that the idea is we are here for the community. We are here to serve the community. That's our just cause. And when we get focused inward on ourselves and we get myopic and it's about me, suddenly we're losing track of what we really should be focused on in the big picture here. And I think that limits our capabilities and limits our willingness to change or our ability to change when our focus is on ourselves.
For sure. And so that ability to see where we could go if we get out of our way and let us get there and not go into the mindset of the finite mindset of like, I just go on calls and I just solve this problem. Like, look at where we're at with community paramedicine. Look at where we're at, with, fire prevention, like if it was just go on, wait till the fire happens and go fight fires, EMS, like where would we be? Like, so there's been some pioneers in our lifetimes even, that have changed that paradigm for us to see. And I don't know if we'll be in the fire service long enough to see the next one. Maybe the community paramedicine might be the next big thing that we will have seen in our lifetime, but or our careers. But like, I think there's such an opportunity for us to go so many different directions and provide such a great service. But sometimes we just get in our own way of the finite part of that conversation. Like, we just run calls and reset bells and smells and that's what we do. And it's like, man, you're here for the community. We could do so much more. And I think someone's going to redefine that at some point. At some point, it's the model won't look right, and somebody's going to redefine that. Some city manager, some community is going to demand of their people. So if you're not constantly looking for improvement, if you're not constantly saying, how can we be better, and the status quo is fine, again, we would still be on the back of the truck, dropping people off the back and killing firefighters at a rate that's unacceptable. And so we make changes, and we go into the next phases of all of this stuff. Is critical.
So how do you assess what needs to be changed?
Well,
or how do you maintain that long vision? Like, how do you see what's coming on the horizon?
Those are two different questions, I think.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's okay. The end game is tiring at the end of the day. It's about your passion and your vision of relentless, just saying, I'm not going to give up, because everyone, in my opinion, is kind of trying to combat many times if you're not the status quo. So it's very hard to embrace in the long game, because you get beat up every day. It's tough to do. But I think that the engagement part, I think it was part of your first part of your question. I might have missed that now, but like, you have to be present to win. You have to know what's going on. So if I'm sitting in my office all day long, if I'm not reading a trade journal, if I'm not going to FDIC, if I'm not doing places and hearing different stuff, my point of reference is 1990 when I started. It's 1999 when I became a captain. Or whatever point in time I'm looking at this situation from. And I know that me, the Kris Kazian of today, 2024, is completely different than I was in 1990. Some for the better, some for the worse, probably.
Right.
But I'm constantly evolving. I'm constantly engaging in my craft, my investing in myself and time and energy. I've taken a new initiative towards some health and wellness stuff. So kind of, losing some weight, making some life decisions, quit drinking about 18 months ago. Like, just said, if I'm going to try to be healthy, I want to live a long, healthy retirement. What is drinking doing for me? What is eating every donut I can find doing for me? What is, not exercising? I'm not exercising as much as I want. My wife's telling me, you got to get out and walk and ride the Peloton that's sitting over there. I want to live in a long, healthy retirement. And the data shows us that, we live, I've heard many different numbers, but somewhere 7 years or less. When we retire, you typically live less than 7 years in retirement. And I want to just start living at year 7 in retirement,
Right.
So making some good decisions today at 50, almost 54, not waiting until I retire. Well, then I'm going to start. Let's do it now. And
Well, I think you bring up a couple of really good points there. And the one I want to circle back on first is the staying abreast of what is changing in the industry. If you're sitting in your firehouse and you don't look outside of it, nothing's going to look any different, right? So I think you have to look broadly at your community. What's changing in the community? How's it shifting? politically, demographically, what's changing on the landscape. Like literally, is new construction happening? One of the emerging things I'm seeing in our neck of the woods are mid-rise structures. Right, those are popping up in every odd shape that you can squeeze them in.
Built out of all what?
Wood.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And
So
So
it looks weird. It's different.
They're different, and the rules are different for those buildings. Right. The fire code rules are different, so the behavior is a little different when you show up there. So, but recognizing those threats means you got to be paying attention, and going to trade conferences, reading trade journals, talking to other pros in the business about what they're seeing in their areas is so important to staying ahead. I think the other piece is talking to your community, whether it be by survey or public open houses or some types of thing, and asking them what they need. Yeah. Right, what they think they need.
Yeah.
Because I think us as firefighters, we're like, no, we know what's best for you. But the reality is that measuring the desirable service, we kind of got to ask them. Now we know there's certain things that have to happen that they're unaware of, like they don't know diddly squat about fighting fire, really. So we kind of have to tell them, hey, you have to educate them. Right. But also, a friend pointed this out the other day. He's like, Mrs. Smith only looks at like how she felt when we left. That's what Mrs. Smith is measuring, right?
Yeah. And her experience at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
If the firefighters are nice at the grocery store, and if she is unfortunate enough to have to call us for some sort of service,
right?
That when we leave, again, don't care what color the truck is outside, doesn't care what the patch on the shirt says,
right?
That she felt that she was treated with compassion,
we made her feel,
and that competence, and they were smiling and nice, and whether they were male or female, white or black, they don't, Asian, they don't care.
Right.
Hispanic, they don't care. Like they want people as people to be there to care in their moment of need.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so true. And if we sit and again just assume we know what it is that people want, we're foolish at the end of the day. Because if that's the way it worked, you would just pull up at McDonald's and they would just hand you a bag. You wouldn't have a drive-through. You would just, you want 1, 2, 3, whatever, like how many people you're trying to serve, and you would get whatever's in the bag. But you get to go to McDonald's and order a Big Mac and whatever you're ordering, because that's how it works. You want to be so having an opportunity to control your destiny and understand that, like, we got to know what people are expecting.
Yeah. The Brene Brown quote that comes to mind is "Clear is kind."
Yep, you've said it a few times.
It's one of my favorites. It's probably getting overused at this point, but it applies so much here, right? If we don't have a clear expectation for what the community desires of us, then we're not going to provide the right service.
Well, this conversation started about leadership, right? And so at the end of the day, it's easy to be gentle and quote respective of people, like by not asking the hard questions or kind of sugarcoating some things. And the clear is kind with Brene Brown is a perfect example of saying, hey, Rain, this is what I need you to do. I know you don't like it, but I need you to do X, Y, and Z and whatever, and this is how it's going to be. We asked earlier about my your experience as a young officer. You used to hate dirty bath. Like, there's certain things we just had. Like a disgusting bathroom is horrible. And this is 1999. So people listening today, like there are people today don't know how to run lawnmowers or swing a mop or whatever. Like this was happening 25 years ago. I had to have a lesson on what I expect to clean the toilets. Incredibly micromanaging. It wasn't my finest moment, but I was so tired of going in and being angry at literally, like, the floor is disgusting, the urinals are disgusting, like whatever. Like, so I did how to clean a bathroom 101, and I felt horrible afterwards. Well, that was probably not my finest moment, but I had to set the stage, right? So clear is kind. At the end of the day, it's better to do that than be angry at them or hold animosity towards them because they're not cleaning the bathrooms when they didn't know. No, when you clean the bathrooms, this is what it really should look like when it's done. Like,
right.
Like clean, not that the mop was in the room and that made it clean. Like, you actually have to put water in the bucket and, like this, and you need to, use the Lysol on the toilet and, that lift up the toilet seat, those type of like. And so clear is kind is a statement that is one that's not new to me, but is, in the last 5 years that I've heard. And absolutely. If you can just explain what you want, whether they like it or not, it's kind, because they know what the rules of engagement are then.
So the leadership challenge in setting clear expectations is being willing to have uncomfortable conversations sometimes. Particularly, you talked about being this officer, but being young in age and dealing with people who are older than you, right? In life, more senior in life, more mature in life, allegedly.
Yeah.
And so having these conversations with people it takes a lot of courage. And so I think that's an interesting thing. We forget that just because you've got a new gold badge, or some bugles, the first set of bugles, or whatever, you have this leadership responsibility thrust upon you. But the tools to be an effective leader are not just bequeathed upon you. You have to develop those tools, and you got to. And for me, it's listening to great podcasts, reading good books, sitting down with mentors, and saying, "Hey, man, I don't understand how to do this." And you got to set your ego aside and ask those hard questions so that you can learn those lessons before they smack you upside the head.
Yeah, I tell all my kids it's about relationships.
Yeah.
Like, having relationships is so important, and knowing where and how you. So, you and I cross paths in a random kind of way, but I knew your name, and I was like, he's not just some schmo. He's a dude that's up and comer. He's got a lot of stuff to offer, and so now I'm like engaged with you and trying to learn more about you, and you're learning more about me, and so we're going to benefit mutually in our careers somewhere down the road. Maybe not tomorrow, but in some point you're going to be like, "Hey, Kris, you said something in that podcast. I need to know about this." Or, "Hey, when we crossed paths in the hallway at a job interview one time, you said this thing, and it made me wonder." And so all the things we do, in my opinion, it all comes from relationships, and how to maximize those opportunities. The random person you meet on the street is so important, because you might need him at some point in time. And so trying to just create that dynamic in your mind of how we all are in this together. No one's better than anybody. We all wake up the same. We all, put our pants on the same, as they say. It's important that we do that. And so being clear in our expectations, clear in our conversations, clear in our relationships, it creates a pathway for success as a person, as a boss, as a subordinate, as a partner in relationships. Like, it's kind of universal language that to me transcends all of it.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, is that it's not about just being a good leader at work. Leadership is something that applies in all facets of our lives, and it takes you talk about the relationship piece. Our self-awareness in our communications with people is about leadership. And you can set leadership aside and say, well, how do I just develop healthy interactions with people? And then the leadership follows, right? People will follow you if they feel loved, they feel connected, they feel like you matter, right?
Yeah.
Then you're being a leader, because they will follow you. And it's born out of that relationship that's developed, where they feel trust and connected.
So, yeah, Ryan, that's a great point, is people feeling mattered, like, has to be genuine. It can't be faux, made up, situational. Like, oh, so right now you're the most important person because there's only two of us in the room right now. Like, I care about who I'm talking to, in a very genuine way. And so if you're fake and you're just, faking it till you make it, some of the quotes we've heard from some of your people that are, bad advice or good advice. I think I might have heard someone say both of those, if I'm not mistaken. You have to be genuine, care about people. And then you talk about trust. Like, it's so interesting. Like, trust is, I can go to a doctor and I'm going to trust a doctor I met for 36 seconds and he's going to give me some diagnosis or do some test or do whatever. He doesn't do anything except have an MD at the end of his name. Maybe I researched him a little bit and someone said he's got 5 stars and he really cares about people or something, He gets automatic trust. But when I feel like we're at the firehouse, like, there's like a rite of passage that before I can trust you, I have to figure it out. You asked about something earlier about the my transition from Illinois to Arizona, and what I undercalculated was trust. In Illinois, I crawled down hallways with people. I traded Christmas so you could have your first Christmas with your baby or your new wife or whatever. I did those things, and I thought that transcended my person, and because that was my DNA. It is my DNA, but I didn't have that rapport with those people. So, and I came in as the chief, and so I'm automatically 3 notches down from trust. And I'm coming in with 3 steps above because I know who I am or what I thought I was doing and what I brought to the table.
Right.
And that trust is not universal. And so it's like, you got to do 100 good things to get a check in the trust box, and you do one thing and they all go away, and
right.
so it's in the fire service specifically, and maybe even more so in today's society where everyone's just so quick to judge everything, and instead of going, hey, maybe you made a mistake. Maybe he was wrong. Does that make me a less of a person or make me less trustful or, and so I think there's a lot of grace that's not given in today's world that is concerning to me as to how we're going to survive this journey called life, this fire service, world we're living in. Cause it's, if you had all the answers, I mean, that would be actually scary, first of all. And it's just not practical,
Yeah.
So.
Well, we definitely, Kelvin Barty, the deputy chief in Phoenix, came on and we had him on the podcast. I can't remember what episode he was, but one of the things that he talked about was, he said, we are one of the only industries that hire people for life. Yeah. So-called life, he says, 25 to 30 year career. And he goes, if we're not going to expect that people are going to screw some stuff up and make some mistakes and grow and change over the course of that, like, we're fooling ourselves. Like, that's exactly what's happening. And so when a kid, 21-year-old kid makes an error or whatever, anybody along the course of their career does something dumb, and then we just like, oh, that just marked them for life. They're done. Mm-hmm. That's just not reasonable.
Yeah. I got a great story. I don't know how much time we have, but we had a shift change. This was back in Illinois. We had a shift Yahtzee. We were doing a draft picks. We had a draft morning. We're there. I was captain. I had my lieutenant with me, and he's like, hey, we're picking this guy. I'll keep his name out because he might listen, but we're gonna pick him. And I'm like, no way, dude. He's not my guy. Nice guy, but he's not where I want to take the shift and where we're going to go. And he's like, trust me, he's a good dude. And I'm like, I don't doubt he's a good dude. That's not what I'm saying. But I had a different vision. But I said, all right, I'll give you my pick. You can have the pick, but he's yours. And turned out I was so wrong. The guy's a rock star, doing great stuff. Chief officer now. I didn't see it in him. Again, not that I saw him as a bad person, but I had some experience. I don't know what it was, but I had some thought that this might not be, where I'd want to pick, first or second for the shift, and turned out to be completely wrong. I just saw him at FDIC and hung out with him, and I don't know if he knows that story exactly, but
but isn't it interesting though that you had some experience that you can't quite put your finger on, but you judged and categorized that person and wrote him off essentially, right?
Yeah. Until
you're proven wrong. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I trusted the lieutenant that said, hey, I want to pick this guy, and I just said, hey, I'm gonna. It wasn't like I'm going to get you, a gotcha type moment. It's like, if you think we're a team, so I can't be right all the time. And it's small little pieces like that. I think go back to the leadership part. Like if you can it's a slice in time and things that just start to pop in your brain, but so I gave up some control, let someone else own it. There's a couple caveats like, hey, if this screws up, it's all on you, bro. But if you don't take those chances, I don't think I am where I am today, and I've got a bunch of them that are like that have come into my life.
Yeah. Well, let's pull it to a close here. Let me ask you: is there a couple questions? Is there anything, a moment in your career, that you reflect on? You're like that was a defining moment for me, or a moment that caused you to pivot?
Well, I talked about that fatal fire, just that definitely is a second fatal fire I'd been on. So it definitely has changed my thoughts on how important the work we have is. So having been on a fatal, not involved in any recovery or anything like that, and then being on one where make a rescue, it ended up being a fatality. But understanding like our job is that important, and it could happen. This is 4:30 in the afternoon. The other one was at 2 o'clock in the morning, so they can happen any time of the day. I think some of the people that I've worked with that have helped guide me, the mentors, the leaders that have been present in my life, and whether I realized how influential they were, I reflect back on it now, and so I can't say it was that moment or this moment, but I made myself available to whatever they were pouring into me, and I don't know if I even knew what that was, but somewhere in there it was happening, and I feel very blessed and very fortunate to be where I am today, through trials and tribulations, successes and failures, to be able to give my thoughts in leadership currently as a operations chief, where I'm at today, second in command. So I've been up to the top, back down. Like I love it. It's what's the best position you've ever had in the fire service? I said the one you have right now. That's the one that's most important. I love being a shift commander, but I love being a lieutenant, and I love being a chief, and I love being so it's where you were, what you up to. So I think just growing from everything that happens, it's a cumulative piece, right? It's not one incident in my mind that makes that defining moment. I think it's just all the incremental things that life brings you, so.
Yeah. Let me ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay.
I had a couple in my head that I wanted to ask you, and it just disappeared. I was like, "Oh, I've got a question." All right, we'll go with low-hanging fruit. Best piece of advice you've ever been given.
Best piece of advice is kill them with kindness. Kill them with kindness was told to me by I was a 16-year-old at that gas station we talked about, and had a poorly educated, I don't know what his education was, but working at a gas station at 50 or 60 years old. So I'm, guessing it wasn't, great, but people would come in and be like, "Hey, wash my windows. It's raining out, dude. Are you serious?" And I come in, mumbling some swear words or something. He's like, "Hey, Kris, just kill them with kindness. That's what they're paying the extra for the gas at the full service gas station. Like, just kill them with kindness, man." And I didn't understand what that really meant until it really processed it. And I've never forgot that conversation. I can almost see where I was at the front of that little gas station, and I just believe in it. Like, just smile, honk and wave is another one that my brother-in-law, who's on the job also in Illinois, just honk and wave. Sometimes you just gotta keep on going and smile. And
that just reminded me of the little penguins in Madagascar. Smile and wave, boys. Yep. Smile and wave.
Yep. So, kill them with kindness and honk and wave maybe are very similar, different ways to say it. But
so, what's your favorite firehouse meal?
Oh man, favorite firehouse meal. I guess we used to do in Illinois. We used to do a appreciation dinner, and we would bring in the neighboring communities back to that mutual aid system to backfill our stations. And so I'd always make a couple big prime ribs for them, and so that was like always like most places order pizza when we went there, and I'm like, oh, we're gonna outdo them. So
pizza.
So good prime rib, but. Any meal you're spending at the firehouse is just being together. So whether it's Taco Tuesday, whether it's, they used to make a steamboat, we called it steamboat pepper steak. That was pretty good. And so I don't really have a favorite. They're just I don't know.
You had me at prime rib.
Yeah, kind of hard to beat that one, I suppose.
All right, last question. What does it mean to be fireground fit to you?
So I think fireground fit to me is loving your people. Loving your people. So truly, like in your heart, loving the people that you work with, loving the job. You gotta love what you do. And I get for some people, we'll talk about, is it a job? Is it a career? Is it a calling? I don't really care what you call it, but you gotta love what you do. And the fact that we get to ride on fire trucks and save people's lives, Like if that isn't enough for you, the pension should, add to that, the healthcare, like whatever it is that floats your boat. But you should really, really love your job, because we're truly blessed to be able to do that. Love your purpose, like what wakes you up in the morning. So loving that you get to wake up and make a difference in people's lives is being Fireground Fit. And then loving being part of your community. Like you were chosen to do that. There was a whole bunch of folks, especially when we were testing, maybe a little different today, and you were selected to make that position. Or as you've moved on in an organization, I've been through a couple, like you were selected for a purpose. So why am I here? Love that you're here. So being present where your feet are is kind of a saying that I don't own that. Someone else said it, but and just love that you get to do what you do. And so by loving what you do, I think you're Fireground Fit. Your mind, body, spirit is whole, and you're able to do better for yourself and for those around you and for those that you serve. And that's my answer.
Right on. Well, thank you, Kris. I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Oh, it's great. I was glad to make an omelet, Rain, and we finally got this done. So it's really cool to be.
Yeah, we've been trying to connect for a minute.
Oh, hot minute.
Right on. Thanks, brother.
Be safe, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. That's all we have for today. Special thanks to Kris for taking time and sharing your thoughts and opinions and wisdoms with us. Greatly appreciated, Kris. If you are enjoying the Fireground Fitness podcast, get on over to Apple Podcasts, rate and review the podcast. This helps other folks find their way to the podcast. Also, if you have thoughts, ideas, opinions that you would like to share with me, go to raingray@firegroundfitness.com and email it on over to me. Lastly, take the lessons that you are learning in your daily life, that you are learning here in this podcast, find ways to improve and shape and develop yourself and your career so that you can be more successful and more effective in all things that you're attempting to accomplish. Now, go on out there, get after it, and get some.